Summary of the Sunflower, On the Possibilities and Limits by Simon Wiesenthal. The first part of the book takes place in a Nazi prison camp, where Simon is working with his friends Adam, Arthur, and Josek. They don't have much to eat and have to work hard for the Nazis, so the conditions are very bad. The SS beats them up, and if they don't work or can't work, they shoot them. He feels like he is not being treated like a person anymore. Many times, Arthur and Josek don't agree because Josek has a strong faith in God, while Arthur and Simon wonder what kind of God could let these horrible things happen. One woman's mean joke that God is on leave rings true to Simon. Simon is taken away from his friends that morning and told to work in a fake hospital that has been set up in the technical school, where he studied design. Simon sees a military graveyard along the way. There is a daisy on each grave. Simon feels sorry for the soldiers who died because he knows he will be buried without being remembered or seen as human. When Simon gets to school, he thinks about how anti-Semitism was common even before the war. During tests, the students planned a day without Jews when Jewish students would be beaten up, and the cops would not be able to do anything because the school was not under their control. A nurse asks Simon if he is Jewish right before he is put to work at the hospital. Carl is a Nazi soldier who is dying and is wrapped all the way around. She brings him to his cot. Carl tells him he has to admit to a terrible crime and then starts to tell him about his life. He was born in Stuttgart and joined the Hitler Youth even though his parents didn't want him to. After that, he signed up for the SS. Nick picks up a dropped letter, holds Carl's hand, and shoos a fly away from Carl while Carl tells his story. Carl then says he did what he did. He forced about 300 Jews into a house and then set it on fire. Other Nazis shot a mother, father, and little boy who tried to jump from a house that was on fire. He can't get rid of the picture of them and starts to cry. Simon doesn't like his story and tries to leave several times, but Carl stops him. When Simon heard about the little boy, he thought of Eli, a little boy from the Lemberg ghetto. By some miracle, Eli had lived through many of the raids on young children. One time, a fake school was set up to get parents to send their kids there. The kids were taken right away to the gas chambers when they did. That day, Eli stayed at home. Simon had not seen a Jewish child like this before. Carl goes on with his story. He fought in Crimea until he was stopped in his tracks by the memory of the Jewish family as he climbed out of the ditches one day. Just then, a shell went off nearby. Carl's face and body were cut up into strips, and the pain was too much to bear. Carl then begs Simon to let him die without any guilt for the bad things he has done. Simon just walks out of the room without saying anything. Simon goes back to the camp to see his friends and tells them what happened with Carl. Arthur and Adam are glad to hear that there is now one less Nazi in the world. Josek, on the other hand, is glad that Simon did not excuse Carl because Simon could not forgive other people's sins. That night, Simon can't sleep because he keeps seeing Eli lying in a heap of blood. Simon screams when he wakes up. Simon goes back to the hospital the next day. The nurse tells him that Carl passed away during the night and left his things and his mother's name and address. Simon doesn't want to take the box. His friends, who are no longer interested in the story, hear him out. There will be death and hunger for the next 2 years. 3 of Simon's friends die in the camps. Simon's thoughts turn to Carl one night, and he tells a Catholic prisoner called Bolek about his situation again. Bolek says Simon should have let Carl off the hook because Carl had no one else to ask. In 1945, Simon is freed from the Mauthausen concentration camp. One afternoon, a sunflower makes him think of Carl. He remembers the name and location of Carl's mother and goes to see her. She tells him about Carl, which backs up what Carl said about his youth. Simon doesn't tell Carl the whole truth about what happened with him. Carl's mother can still remember good things about her son because he stays quiet. Then Simon asks the people who read it what they would have done instead. The second part of the book is called The Symposium, and it has 53 answers to his question. A bishop, several rabbis, the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, and Albert Speer are just a few of the people who have answered. Most of the people who answered Simon's question drew on their religious upbringings. There are some trends in the answers that stand out. Most people who don't want to forgive are Jewish. They say that Simon can't forgive sins in the name of others, which means that murder isn't forgiven. Some people think that believing in God's forgiveness is not enough, and that Carl showed how anti-Semitic he was by asking a random Jewish person for forgiveness, as if all Jews were one big mass and not a diverse group of individuals. People who want to forget, who are mostly Christians, say that there is no end to what can be forgiven. They say that Carl should be forgiven for his sins if he was truly sorry, which is what Simon says he was. If Carl was truly sorry, then God would still punish him, or they say that Simon should forgive because forgiveness comes from God. Some people argue from a different point of view, saying that Simon would be freed from his own problems if he could forgive. But most of the people who answered agree on two things. First, that these acts should never be ignored, even if they are forgiven, and second, that Simon showed Carl a lot of compassion even if he didn't say it out loud.
About the author. Simon Wiesenthal was born in 1908 in Buchak, Galicia, which is now in Ukraine but was part of Austria-Hungary at the time. His younger brother died when he was very young, and his father died in battle in World War I. He studied design at the Czech Technical University in Prague and graduated in 1932. Wiesenthal gives his wife Sila the German name Lemberg. They got married in 1936 when he moved back to Lwow, Galicia. When Poland was split up in September 1939, Lemberg was taken over by the Soviet Union. By November 1941, Jews were being made to work to build the Lemberg ghetto. Simon and his wife were then taken from their homes and put in the ghetto. Simon was taken from his wife and put through 5 different prison camps during the war. He finally ended up in Mauthausen. It was May 5, 1945, when the Americans freed Mauthausen. Simon and his wife were reunited in late 1945. Then Wiesenthal started to gather evidence for future war crimes cases. In 1947, he opened the Jewish Documentation Center in Linz to do this. He helped catch and try many Nazi officials because of his work, but most of the people whose names he collected were never put on trial. He died in September 2005.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.